Less than a week after the Barr summary memo outlining the Mueller report, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are bracing for what's next. Democrats say release the whole thing, believing there's probably a lot more to the findings. Most Republicans say release the whole thing. This will strengthen the President Trump's position and prove that he's been exonerated. One supporter of releasing the Mueller report in its entirety is philanthropist and Democratic donor Tom Steyer. In the fall of 2017, he launched Need to Impeach, a grassroots movement to remove President Trump from office. Mr. Steyer says the Barr memo is of little consequence, and he joins me now here on the Rising Couch. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so the Barr memo came out. What do you think?
Well, what we've been saying for over a year is don't wait for the Mueller report. That in fact, in the public record is evidence that we have the most corrupt president in American history. Let's get public hearings going in Congress so the American people can see for themselves what's going on. That when the Mueller report comes out, there should be a lot of information in it, and it will, examine it and look at it voraciously and make sure the American people see it. But really what we want to do is get the information directly to the American people through public hearings. So in fact, we still don't have the Mueller report, as you said.
Yeah, so you've got on your website 10 points that you think are reasons the country should be trying to impeach Donald Trump. Maybe there are two of them that have been addressed by the Mueller report and the Barr memo, so far as we know, because we don't really know what's in the Mueller report. We only know what the Attorney General has reported. So what are the other things that you think matter when it comes to thinking about the president?
Well, it's funny. We asked 54 legal scholars to give us a presentation for the criteria that Mr. Trump has met to be impeached. And they gave us 10, and we put them on our website. But what I've been saying for the last year, and because I think it's important for the American people to have something understandable, and what I've said is he's the most corrupt president in American history, and he's obstructed justice. Those are very straightforward things where I felt there was evidence in the public record so that we could have hearings and let the American people into the conversation. I mean, what we've done is we have a petition that 7.7 million Americans have signed saying that they believe this president should be removed from office. And what we're saying is, let's have a series of hearings. Let's get the information directly to the American people so that we can make up our minds about what's happened and how important it is and whether we should remove the president.
Do you think that we're more or less likely to talk about impeachment now that we've seen this Barr memo and the Republican AG has sort of set the tone for the conversation around the Mueller report? Do you think we're more or less likely to get to your result, which is removing the president?
Well, again, what I would say is the question on that will really swing on what the American people think. And unless we have public hearings where we get direct information, then I don't think this system can work at all. And I think it's improper. So let me give you an example.
But don't we have some of these hearings starting to happen, right? You got Elijah Cummings in oversight. You got the Judiciary Committee. You've got Schiff in the Intel Committee, who are all starting to have examination of what's happening inside the administration. So aren't we having those hearings?
Well, let me say this. Think about the last year. We've actually only had one hearing, which was in the Oversight Committee under Congressman Cummings, where they had Michael Cohen for a day, and Americans tuned in. I mean, it was must-see TV, right? We've had one other public hearing in the last year, which was Brett Kavanaugh, which was must-see TV. And that, to me, is exactly what we're looking for. Not one hearing, but a series of hearings so we can understand as Americans.
But those are still about Russia. What about the other topics? You talked about the corruption.
What was about Russia?
The Michael Cohen hearing touched on Russia. Well, I guess the Kavanaugh hearing obviously wasn't.
But what I'm talking about is what public hearings really mean. That it's not one thing, that it's a series of hearings so Americans can see who we're talking about, the systematic corruption that's occurred, so we can decide, does this rise to the level of impeachment? Because the question here is about broad-based and equal justice in our society. Do the richest and most powerful people get to break the law, get to break their oath to the Constitution and the American people, whereas everybody else in society has to obey the rules?
Okay.
That is the most basic question we're asking is, are we setting a precedent that the president is above the law.
So is criminality what you think is at stake here, or is there a standard less than criminality that you think matters?
Well, clearly this is not criminality. That the standard here is a political standard in the Constitution. Really, when you go back to the original writing of it, has the president broken his oath to the Constitution and to the American people by not living up to his promise to put them first? Is there anything where he is actually putting his interests ahead of the American people instead of doing what's right? Because that is, it should be and is absolutely unacceptable.
Okay, this week, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell put the Green New Deal, or some version of it, on the floor of the Senate. No Democrats voted for it. How do you feel about that? Somebody's been paying a lot of attention to climate change in your work.
So let's talk for 1 second about the Green New Deal. So Senator Markey and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez put forward a very broad solution to a very broad problem. And it isn't legislation, it's kind of an outline of what you could do to address it. And I give them enormous credit for what they did. They took a gigantic issue in front of the American people, which is the sustainability of our country and the safety and health of every American, and tried to put on the table something that is commensurate with the problem. Do I agree with every part of it? No, absolutely not. It's a first draft, a discussion document that I think is a dramatic reframing of the problem. As a result of that, Mitch McConnell, someone who's been lying deliberately about science, who in my mind is putting the safety and health of every American at risk in return for campaign contributions from the fossil fuel industry, has decided that in some way this is to his political advantage to try and point out the problems that he sees in this first draft and proposal. And so from my standpoint, I view the Green New Deal as a way that has in fact been extremely successful about drawing attention to a gigantic problem and reframing it. And I see the people who have been doing everything they can to frustrate progress, everything they can to in fact put American lives and safety at risk, now trying to use that politically for their advantage. So when I think about the Green New Deal, what I see is people trying to move the ball forward in an important way, representing the overwhelming bulk of Americans. And I see the Republicans continuing to intentionally deceive at the risk of the safety of Americans.
But don't you think Democrats are moving away? There are some Democrats who are moving away from this Green New Deal. A lot of the people who were maybe in some of these states where Democrats won some elections in the last 2018. You know, are you dividing? Does the Green New Deal divide Democrats based on ideology?
So let me say this. First of all, if you actually go out and ask Democratic voters, what do they care about? The two biggest issues in their minds are healthcare and climate. So the question is, if you come out with a proposal that actually frames the problem appropriately, that isn't perfect, there are parts of it that many Democrats will disagree with, including me. But does it divide the Democrats to start a conversation about how to craft a solution to a problem that definitely exists and is definitely getting worse? I don't think that's divisive. I think, in fact, the conversation is necessary, and the idea that we'd start with the perfect solution is unrealistic.
What about the people who have to win by not just winning Democratic votes? They've got to win some independents and maybe a couple of Republicans.
So this is really at the heart of the impeachment discussion. This is at the heart of the climate discussion, the energy discussion. If you look at 2018, there are two different views about what happened. We're the largest grassroots organization in the United States. We're on 420 college campuses. You know, our list voted at an 80% rate. We hit 10 million doors with our partners in the organized labor movement. Mm-hmm. You know, we are out there, and we believe that what happened in 2018 was that, by contrast with the previous midterm elections in 2014, 57% of Americans voted versus 37%, an increase of 60%. And what happened was, if you count up all the congressional votes, Democrats won by 9%. So if you ask me what happened, it was a turnout election. Democrats decided in 14, they voted at historic lows. In 18, they voted at historic highs. The young people who we organized turned out more than twice the rate. So when you say to me, did people win because we convinced 1 or 2% in the middle that they didn't understand what they thought about Donald Trump, but that in fact we were preferable? Or did we in fact go to the 63% of Americans who didn't vote in 2014 and say to them, there's a real reason to vote?
Okay, I got one more question before we leave. You spent your life working in business, banking, investments. Why do you care about all this stuff so much?
Well, let me say this. I am someone who's a business person. I'm an investor. It's something that for me, I enjoyed, and in some ways, figuring out political, economic systems, industries, how companies work, is fascinating for me. It's just a gigantic puzzle. But I'm also someone who is absolutely aware of what I owe to this society, to what it's provided for me, what my family's provided, what America's provided, and how much people have sacrificed to make that possible for me, and my obligation as a decent person and as an extremely proud American to give back to the system.
Was there something that happened, though, that really taps you into that? Was there some part of your life that muscle got developed?
Look, I think I grew up with parents who were justice people. My mom ran school volunteer programs in the poorest public schools and in the Brooklyn House of Detention. You know, my dad was a Nuremberg lawyer. They had a sense of extreme pride in America, but a sense that justice was an ongoing process, that we started in an extremely unjust place in many ways. I mean, if you think about the Constitution, it includes things that are abhorrent to us today, but that the process of justice is one that you have to work for. And I think that if I had made my life about taking advantage of the opportunities I was given, that I would feel it was massively incomplete. I view myself as ridiculously lucky to be able to be part of the people pushing towards justice in America. I view that as a great gift, that I have the time and the capability to be part of that group of people pushing hard, and it's, you know, an incredible joy for me.
Great. Tom Steyer, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. We'll be right back with more Rising after this.